Malcolm Fry has began his IT career in 1967, and in the following years took on development, operational, and management roles for retail, manufacturing, oil, and pharmaceutical organizations. He has received worldwide recognition as one of the foremost authorities in the areas of help desk and IT service management. He is the author of 5 best-selling books on IT service and support, the newest being a step-by-step guide to building a CMDB. In addition, he has had many articles and papers published in multiple languages. Malcolm is an innovative and informative strategic consultant sought after by many large organizations that see him as a catalyst to initiate improvements by reviewing their facilities and processes, and most importantly, preparing plans to allow them to meet their business and IT objectives. Malcolm will give you a more of an introduction for his guest, Lou Hunnebeck, but he'll talk to you more about Lou. And the last thing I'll say before Malcolm, you pop in here is Malcolm really is in line with what our strategy is in Thought Rock and what we want to bring to our Thought Rock members, which is to focus on education, and at the same time to focus on entertaining, and the last thing is to hopefully energize folks to take some steps and do some things different. So with that, Malcolm, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Rick. I appreciate it. Hi, Lou. How are you going?
I'm pretty good. I don't know, Malcolm. That was a pretty impressive introduction. I don't know if I can stand up to that one.
You're going to have to do it, man. I'm telling you, you're going to have to do it. Hey, Lou, I was trying to remember when we first met. I was really trying to work. It's like a married couple or something. When we first met, I think it was in Las Vegas at a conference.
Yeah, I think that's the first time we really connected and spent any time chatting. A nice long walk back from the Treasure Island all the way down to, was it Mandalay Bay, I think?
The Mandalay Bay, yeah, I remember it really well. There was some really noisy party. just drove me crazy. I couldn't stand it. The party is too loud when you can't order a beer and no one can hear you.
Or you hear the person standing next to you.
That's when it gets too loud. Yeah, exactly. I think we got your slide up, Lou, about your career, 16 years in IT, and the frequent speaker. Virtually every one of those every year now, huh?
Almost, yeah.
And the what is the QA team for ITIL? What does that mean?
Well, when ITIL version 3 was published back in 2007, after the authors had made their first draft, a number of people were tasked to review and be quality assurance and provide feedback before the final edition was put to typeset. And I participated in that quality assurance team in that first publication of version 3.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. My book, ITIL Light, which is my latest book, ITIL Light, just been translated into Japanese. And they spotted 7 quite dramatic mistakes, typecast mistakes. And we QA'd it and QA'd it and QA'd it. It's amazing how they slip through. It's
you spend too much time with something. It's so easy to overlook something. So you do need a bunch of fresh eyes to look at something and catch it.
Absolutely.
Just to point out where something doesn't make any sense at all.
No, let's just leave that for a minute and go to Lou the lady. I see you're a member of Global Volunteers, and I see you're going to be going to the Cook Islands. What does that all involve?
That's right, that's right. Many years ago I heard about this organization. They're based out of St. Paul, and they have service programs that they run all over the world, including in the United States, but as well as on almost every continent. And I took the opportunity in 2002 to participate in my first Global Volunteers program. That was in China, teaching conversational English for 3 weeks. And since then
I should have attended that.
Oh, you converse pretty fluently, Malcolm. But since that time, I participated in programs in Peru, where I worked in a foster care facility, in India, where, again, I worked in a foster care school situations, assisting little children, and this year it will be in the Cook Islands, and this is another English program that we're doing.
That's cool. I see your science fiction and Shakespeare, huh? That's kind of a big shift, I must say.
Isn't it?
Anyway, enough, no more. 'Tis not the spruces, 'twas before. Let's move on to the next slide, huh?
Very good.
Okay, that was Twelfth Night for everybody just wondering what it was. I too like Shakespeare, but not obsessively. So what we're going to be talking about, we're going to do a quick introduction into the subject, then Lou's going to be taking over at that point and telling us what was the project, why was it undertaken, and how is it being done, and what's the current status, and then telling us how we're going to get hold of it, what we're going to see, and so on and so forth. So Lisa, if we just go on to the next slide. And Lou, it's all yours. Why are we doing this update? What is it?
Well, as we all know, in the beginning of June of 2007, what has become known as ITIL Version 3 was published, and there was great rejoicing, and angst and gnashing of teeth, etc. Lisa, if you want to give a click to complete this slide. Essentially, it is the commitment of the OGC to make sure that ITIL is continually improved. So after version 3 was published and we all started reading and using it and trying to make progress using it, people started providing feedback about the books. And the project was undertaken as part of a commitment to continual improvement to respond to feedback, identify what updates need to be undertaken, and to put them into the book to make them more usable and more successful for their objective. Now, it's one of the things that we want to make clear is that what's being produced from this project is not a new version of ITIL, but rather what we call a new edition. So it's part of this continual improvement process that will be done cyclically. One more click for me, Lisa, on this one. We are having a little bit of technical difficulty, so Lisa is being our kind navigator. So this new edition, the reason it's an edition and not a brand new version is that the underpinning framework is unchanged. All the core principles are unchanged. This is really to make it more useful for the market. So once more, Lisa, we'll move on. So a lot of people say, well, look, there's all this great tasty stuff in here. Why? Well, let's look at some bullets here about the mandate for change. Lisa? We've got a few reasons. First was we have a change control log. In fact, if you would like to contribute to the change control log, you can do so. And when we finish this slide, we'll have the address for you. Essentially, we want to do what we say, which is be committed to continual improvement and structured change. So anyone who wants to can submit a change request for any part of ITIL. And we got all sorts of things on that log, everything from there's a typo on page 79 to this concept is rubbish and we really should alter it. So that was one key reason, was as a result of reviewing the content of the change log. Next.
Lou, can you give a kind of figure, how many items were in the control log when you started?
There were probably about 500 of various names and shapes. Now, of course, remember, you might have multiple people who caught the same item. If it was a typo, or I recall in the strategy book there was some just math error in one of the figures and things like that. So there were some very small things, there were things that a number of people caught, and then there were some really insightful comments that were extremely useful there.
So second question, if I submitted and said this needs to be changed, let's just say it's a typo, would I get feedback saying this is your request number, or?
Well, numbers were assigned, and anyone can go to the log online and look up an item that they submitted or that anyone submitted and see the status. Now, it's not updated, by, well, now we moved it to the left and now we moved it to the right, but, there are periodic updates to the master change log for informational purposes, as there should be.
So you can't say this, but I can. So all of you out there that are skeptics, you have an opportunity to do something about it. Don't just sit back and let it happen.
That's right. I think that's very important. You're right.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, not at all. So also another source of information was advice from the official ITIL Change Advisory Board. This is made up of people from all over the industry and at different levels to contribute to it. And Lisa, another 2 clicks for me. Also, the users and the training community have provided feedback. And there's your link where you can go find the change control log. So if you go to www.best-management-practice.com /change log, you can find that change log there and you can make contributions. So please, have at it. So this were basically a lot of the sources of information that were drawn upon and that really created a mandate to move forward with this improvement cycle. Lisa? Lisa? There we go. So let's get a few clicks to grow these things and get our bullets out there. The stated aims of the project. First of all, something was actually wrong, an error, an inconsistency. For example, sometimes we found that something was in a diagram, but in the text they didn't match each other precisely. So in content or the way something was presented, out-and-out errors and inconsistencies were to be addressed. So that's the first and foremost. The second was items of improvement where there were issues in a change log where the Change Advisory Board and the OGC deemed those to be actionable. Obviously, sometimes people suggested items that really weren't appropriate, or they were too much one person's opinion. It was going to maybe make a fundamental change to the point of view, and that would not have been deemed appropriate. And of course, there were some suggestions made from the training community, from individual users. And one more click, Lisa. So that, of course, was a source of ideas. And one last piece, and that was the strategy publication. Because while most of the industry found a lot of extremely useful ideas in the strategy publication, the language and the way it was presented was deemed to be a little inaccessible. So not everybody really felt entirely comfortable there. And that's why we wanted to make that more clear, more concise, and easier for everyone to use, and you didn't have to feel like you were suddenly taking an MBA.
Actually, no, that's really important, because with cloud computing, strategy becomes much more important.
Absolutely.
You really have to get the strategy right on the nail. There's no missing at all. You have to get it exactly right.
Mm-hmm. And I think that,
sorry, Lou.
I think that that's also something that version 3 in general has been trying to get across, that to leadership in IT, that service management is not something my people do. It's not something that is only applicable to folks on the operational level or even the tactical level, that we all have to take a much more strategic approach and really look at the big picture there. So anything that helps people use that guidance in strategy and put that into their way of working, I think is extremely valuable.
Yeah, I think so, because yeah, you could argue that one of the biggest decisions some IT organizations make is making that decision to go to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself can be a massive decision. So I think we need to take that into account. That's a real good point.
And I think we're always going to be confronted with new approaches, new technologies, things appear to be the hot thing right now. And is there real value in that for us as an organization? You've got to take those strategic decisions and not let things happen to you, like you were just standing in the waves and you got knocked over. So, Lisa, shall we get the next slide, please? Great. And some clicking to fill the baby out. So a lot of folks have asked us what's in scope of this update, what's out of scope of the update. In scope is a few specific things in particular, like roles and responsibilities in the first edition were not always clearly defined. So we've tried to sharpen that material up. Certainly making sure that the way processes are discussed is consistent. They were more detailed in one or two publications, and other publications some processes were discussed in a very high level, so we want to make that consistent. And we also wanted to make sure that glossary definitions and the way they were described and used in the text are in line with each other. We found that that was confusing. Sometimes the same term might be described using different language. And as we all know, language can be interpreted. So that could lead people to have different understandings of the meaning of some of the language in ITIL, and that's, of course, needs to be clarified. So those are some of the things that are in scope. At least a couple more bullets for what's out of scope, and improving accessibility, as we know, of strategy. Completely new concepts. These are things that are out of scope of a new edition of an existing version. Also, any changes that would invalidate current use of ITIL, either the way people are adopting ITIL in their organization or the certification program. We didn't want anything that was going to say, nope, nope, go back, start over, recertify, or no, go back, rip out what you've been doing, do something else. So those things are definitely out of scope of that version.
So that should make some of the folks listening a little bit more comfortable, huh?
Hopefully. Yeah, I know there's been a lot of concern about that in the market. Lisa?
So how are we doing it, Lou? How's it being undertaken?
Well, the first thing was to define the scope of the project. So OGC and the Change Advisory Board sat down, looked at all the material that they had, all the inputs from the various places, particularly the changelog, and defined the scope of what would be in this update. The TSO, who have the license to publish, or the ones to manage the project on behalf of the OGC. And then a call for participants was issued, looking for people to be authors as well as people to be reviewers. The authors were selected in December of 2009, and reviewers were selected very hard upon that in January of 2010, and then we set to work. One of the things that was decided was that we would learn from the work on version 3, the original edition, and instead of having one reviewer cycle, we would have 2. And I think that that's been a great boon to the project. Lisa, let's move on and take a look at who's involved in this and how the project has been structured. So leading the whole thing is the ITIL Update Project Board, and this includes representation of the OGC and the Change Advisory Board and just people from throughout the leadership, but particularly OGC. Then there's a project manager and a team manager. They both come from the stationary office, or TSO, and the day-to-day advisors to the project board there's a technical advisor, the ATO subgroup, ATOs being the accredited training organizations. So there's a subgroup from them who provide advice, and of course the Change Advisory Board. There were a number of mentors selected to be there for support and guidance and bringing more expertise to the table. And then, of course, the authors for the individual publications were selected. So let's, Lisa, click on the next one to see who these players are in the various project teams. So here's your update board. We've got 2 executives from the OGC. We've got representation from the...
Lou, can you just give us a definition of the OGC?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so used to the shorthand.
Yeah,
like when
exactly.
you work with the government or the military and you get used to all their acronyms. Yeah,
The funny thing is that people in IT, I was talking to a friend the other day who's complaining their children use code all the time when they're typing, and then proceeded to throw about 1,000 initials at me. So, it's our version of teenage thumbs.
Yeah, so the OGC, when it comes to ITIL, is the Office of Government Commerce, and they are the owners of the intellectual property of ITIL, a division of the UK government. It used to be the CCTA. That was the name of the group into which OGC merged, and so Office of Government Commerce are the ones who own the intellectual property of ITIL, and therefore, of course, they need to be actively represented on the Update Project Board. Another of the key players is, of course, the official accreditors who have a contract from the OGC to run the certification and accreditation scheme, and that is APM Group. So, of course, we have a representative from APM Group on the board, representatives from ITSMF International, specifically the publications director. They're trying to speak for the people who use this stuff on a day-to-day basis, and representatives of the key suppliers of the OGC, and that would be, as I said, the TSO, the stationary office. They have the license to publish, and APM Group, which is, of course, the accreditor, and that's the president of that. So that's basically who comprises the ITIL Update Project Board. And they get to have the final say of yes or no. Lisa. So the next is who's serving as the mentors. Our overall project mentor is Shirley Lacey, and many people will recognize her name as one of the original authors of version 3, as was Colin Rudd, who was my mentor because I was on the service design book. He also was the mentor for transition and operation. And David Wielden, who was the mentor for strategy and CSI, and then our indispensable Ashley Hanna, who is our technical continuity mentor, and he helped to make sure that we all worked and played well with others and that everything knit together and made sense. Hail, Ashley.
Actually, Lou, Shirley, Colin and David have been involved with ITIL for a long, long time. In fact, David can actually claim to be one of the original writers of ITIL, if I remember right.
You are correct.
Yeah, he's a good man.
Very. And Colin, of course, was one of the original two authors of Service Design, so having him as my mentor I found to be extremely valuable, because I could corner him and say, what did you originally mean by this?
yeah, that's, but Shirley also, that's Dr. Shirley Lacey, in fact, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, and Shirley also has been involved since the beginning, and those three really have made a lot of difference to the ITIL world.
We've tried so hard to shake them, but they won't go away.
Yeah, they won't.
No, they all were absolutely wonderful to have on the project. So we were
Okay,
lucky.
sorry to interrupt. I will again anyway, but sorry for this one.
Please don't hesitate. This is a team effort here.
It certainly is.
Lisa? And then here's us, the people that you can blame if you don't like anything that we've done. Service strategy was wrangled by our friend David Cannon. Many may be familiar with David as having served in the past as president of ITSMF USA and also as one of the luminaries and one of the original authors of the version 3. I am the person who's worked on the service design for the update. Mr. Stuart Rance was transition. Randy Steinberg had the honor of service operation, Vernon Lloyd on CSI, and then of course the introduction book that brings a high-level introduction to all of the stages is Anthony Orr. So yes, we've gotten to know each other entirely too well.
Again, it's a wonderful bunch of very, very smart people.
Well, thanks very much. I have to say
I was going to say with one exception.
Very good, very good. Well, I must say when I submitted my application to be an author, I thought, well, there's so many more people out there who are smarter than I don't know, but I'll give it a stab. So I felt very honored to have been selected. It's nice to feel you can make a contribution, you know, and help make things better and easier and smarter and cheaper and whatever.
Yeah, especially also as I know you've got a very open mind, and some folks wouldn't have. These are pretty open-minded people anyway in this list.
Yeah. I think that's one of the very important things is we can all get pretty passionate about ITIL and IT service management, and when you're trying to make something that can be usable to the most people in the most various and different situations, you have to be willing to hear other people's point of view and argue it out, and be willing to accept something where somebody comes up with a better way of saying it than you did. So I think we found a good balance here between passion and logic.
Right. Okay, let's have a look now. What was the general project flow? How did this all fit together? I mean, we've got the team and we know what we're trying to achieve and we've got the structure, so what was the flow of the project itself?
Well, I think Lisa's going to show us that.
Oh, really? That's a surprise. There we go.
So, in general, first and foremost was the authoring stage. So we all had our lists of all the items that were for action, and we had some feedback on all of those items from the Change Advisory Board and the Project Board that had made them put them on the list for action. We had to try to identify address the issues that were identified in each of our own publications and work on consistency across the titles. So that all took obviously a number of months. Then we went into our first public review stage, and during that first public review, people reviewed individual titles based on a set of criteria that they were asked to look at, and then there was also people right at that first stage that looked across the titles for consistency, and that was really excellent to get feedback early on to make sure that even though we thought we were working closely together, we needed to make sure that we were, and that there were no inconsistencies that could not be addressed. So then we took all of that feedback and went back into the second authoring stage, responded to those issues and concerns that may have been raised in the review, and made sure that anything that had been worked on that perhaps we didn't have it quite the way we wanted it yet continued to mature and was improved. Then we went into our second public review stage. It was very similar to the first, but a much more intense focus on consistency across the library. And then we moved into the final authoring and publishing stage where would correct any final issues that were raised during the review, and then TSO had to take over for preparing the titles for actual publishing. Lisa? So, where are we now? That's one more click. The good news is almost everything is finished. One more click, Lisa. That very last item, the publishing stage, that's where we are. So the books have been typeset, the figures are being redrawn, and those have been reviewed, and they're really physically preparing for the publication right now. So that's where we stand.
All right. So what do you think we're going to see, Lou? What are we going to see out of all this? Have you got a summary or something for us?
I think we have. Lisa?
Cool. Oh, yeah.
So first and foremost, as we said, things that we felt could be sharper. Clarification was one of our kind of watchwords, are things that we can make more clear than they were. Consistency was another watchword. So descriptions of roles have been sharpened and made consistent from title to title where there were a few inconsistencies. When it comes to organizational structure, people had asked for more examples. Now, while we try very, very hard to make sure people understand these are merely examples, they are not meant to prescribe how you should structure your organization, we've provided more examples. Also, there was an issue with the way the CSFs and KPIs, or the critical success factors and key performance indicators, were presented in the original editions. Their relationships to each other were not made entirely clear. So that's been improved and they've been reorganized. Also, we've made some references to some of the newer trends out there, such as cloud computing, as you've already mentioned, virtualization, things like that. So some content there and appropriate references. It's not every other word in the text, but we've tried to start to highlight where people might be thinking of that. The glossary has been entirely updated and made to be consistent with text in the book. So if the text says, XYZ is this, then the glossary says that too. I'll say hallelujah, say glory.
Yeah, it's about time.
Also, from title to title, the overall structure of the chapters has been made consistent. Now, there's certainly things that need to be unique to each book, but we've positioned it in the same general place in each title, so it's much more consistent structure. As well as we've made consistent the structure for how to present information about a process. So that also has been made much more consistent. In addition to talking about inputs and outputs from individual processes, we also have provided information about inputs and outputs from each lifecycle stage to, again, clarify that. There's more process flow and activity diagrams as appropriate. We've enhanced our description of functions as well. So there's basically a lot of things that where there was any opportunity for lack of clarity, we've tried to improve that. There were a few topics that were given short shrift that have been given a deeper attention in the new editions. So I'm hoping folks will be happy with our work.
Yeah, I think there's some quite interesting, just on this slide, there's some quite interesting points to bring up. Bullet point 2, organization examples, and bullet point 9 or 10, whatever it is, more process flow or activity diagrams. I think that's quite important. One of my personal criticisms was there could have been some more diagrams that would have helped me to understand some of the long sort of 2 or 3 pages of solid text. And sometimes you think, couldn't I just put a little diagram in here just to make things a bit clearer for me so I know what I'm reading. So I know that's not been an aim, but that's been, looks like it's been happening anyway in here.
Yeah, we've tried to do that. I think that there's definitely more room for improvement in that area, but I think that what we've done is made some improvements. And I'm just thrilled that there were a few out-and-out mistakes in diagrams that was basically from the way someone's diagram was redrawn, and of course the graphics people don't know the subject matter, and a few of those things got through into the final version in version 3. So we've made some serious corrections there as well.
I'm interested about cloud computing because one of the things about cloud computing for me that's important is the NIST definitions, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. So Did you actually use those? Do you know those definitions, the ones we know, SAS, IAS, hybrid, public, and so on, or did you use ITIL ones?
Well, I think that the key thing to remember is that our approach has been to not get too specific about how to address situations like cloud, but to let people see how the general guidance of ITIL can be drawn upon in those situations. So I wouldn't say that there's extensive references or that we've gone so far as to follow those definitions, but that's certainly a place where people can take it the next step.
The other point I like as well is fourth from the bottom there, consistent book chapter structure. That means they will start off with, say, introduction, objective, scope, or something like that. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So not only the structure of the chapters from title to title, but also, as I said, when you're presenting a process, every process has to include certain information, and I think it's much more usable for those of us in the industry.
So. I mean, looking at all the things we've got here, if I've just bought a set of books, do I need to rebuy?
I would say, well, first of all, those of you who don't have physical printings, who have an online subscription, which you have to renew every year anyway, will just automatically get access to the updated editions as soon as they're available. So that will just happen automatically for anyone who has the online subscription. For those of us who have either hard copies or the PDFs or perhaps the ebook versions, I would say that it depends on whether or not there is significant improvement to the guidance in a particular area. I don't think most people are going to need to go out and rebuy every book in the library. But I would personally recommend that you seriously consider the strategy book, because that's undergone the most improvement, most alteration, if you will, from the original way the content was presented. But it's absolutely not a requirement. You might want to take a look at somebody's access to the online stuff and see, based on what you're doing and how you're doing it, if you think you're ready to take advantage of some of the clarifications.
Okay, I've got another question now. This is perhaps more personal. That is, what have you learned personally from working on this particular project? It's quite a big project and it's quite unique. It's not the sort of thing you come across every day.
Very, yes. By the way, Lisa, we can do one more if you want. Gee, what have I learned? I've learned that there's always more to learn from the ideas in ITIL themselves. I mean, not that I didn't already know that, but the more deeply I've spent time with the actual content, or the canon, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Is that a pun?
No, not to David. The more I found there. So, it's funny. You think you know something, and you spend a lot of time reading and teaching and updating and that sort of thing. But the more intimate time I spent with the titles, the more I appreciated them and the places that I could go from there. So that was kind of a surprise to me. I thought I knew what value was there and how much was there. I've also come to appreciate the fact that there are humans involved. And it, as much as I've even myself in the past complained about A or B or C, when I saw what went into it and how many different ways of looking at something there could be above and beyond the ones that I'd even thought about, it just makes me really appreciate that anything that's out there that anyone puts out.
Yeah, when I wrote ITIL Light, I had to read a lot of the chapters in great depth and analyze them in my head and so on and so forth. And it's not until you do that you realise the volume that's actually there and the volume of good information that's actually there. It's quite incredible. Rick, do we have any questions?
Malcolm, yeah, I just want to do a quick time check here. So it's 12:38 right now, so there's a couple of other questions that I wanted to try to get at, and hopefully we can get them covered. So if that's okay with you guys, I think you've kind of wrapped up the formal part. Lou, are you okay for a few more questions?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So one of them is related to, I guess, the training materials that are out in the market. And so once the new editions are published, will all the training providers immediately be training on these new editions?
Well, obviously, it takes time for people to become familiar with the material and decide what and how and to what degree they need to update their education. And it takes time for us to read them, the publications. So this time, I can't give you specific detail. I am on the exam panel, so I actually do know about the general approach that's being used. We're not yet at liberty to give those specifics out, but what I can say is this. I think that they've done a very good job of considering the issues of people who attend education and the issues of organizations that deliver accredited education, and tried to make it possible for accredited training organizations such as my own organization, Third Sky, to really provide high-quality material that will not only help people learn and use these ideas in the marketplace, but will also allow them to become certified without concerns about, well, this version or that version or the other version. So I apologize for not being able to give you more specifics right now, but I am very excited about how well they've considered those needs. Right.
Okay. And I guess along those lines is, in terms of the whole versioning idea, are there going to be, do you feel there are going to be more regular updates going forward? And the second part of that question is, why was there not just a jump to like a version 4? Why kind of, I guess, why the subsets of version 3?
I think that we're kind of used to this in terms of programming, that when there's a sea change, you do another whole version. When there's incremental alteration, fixing of bugs, you know, a little enhancement here, a little enhancement there, we do new editions. So the publishing world is accustomed to the idea of new editions where we aren't making wholesale change to the content. And I think that's the intention here, is to make it clear that this is not, I mean, when we went from version 2 to version 3, it was a complete reorganization of the guidance in ITIL to a different orientation to really focus us on service provisioning and make it less process by process by process way of looking at the world. That was a very big sea change in the way the guidance is organized. This is not. So I think that that makes sense.
Okay. Very important question. Oh, sorry.
Well, you know, OGC is committed to continual improvement. So
Right.
as people submit requests and ideas in the changelog, when they feel that there is sufficient mandate to do another improvement, there may be another update cycle, but I wouldn't anticipate that for a number of years.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Another important question here, and it's with respect to, I don't know how much specifics you can give, but do you have any, this is a question from a gentleman by the name of Bob, is there any very specific examples that you can give at this time about actual changes?
Well, we're not calling them changes so much as we're calling them clarifications.
All right.
Gee.
Can you think of an additional? Can you think of an additional graphic, for example, that was in the strategy book you were working on?
Well, no, I worked on design, not strategy.
Design. Sorry, Lou. Yeah, sorry.
I've seen strategy. Well, I'll give you one example in the sense that the business relationship management in strategy in the first edition was not given very much attention. It was there, but it wasn't given very much attention. It's given significantly more attention in the next edition, and I think that the guidance will be extremely helpful for people to go ahead and use the ideas. So there were ideas there, but they weren't expressed with great clarity or depth. And I think that's a specific example that I could probably get away with.
Okay. And sorry, Lou. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there are some things that people may perceive as change that is really an intent to clarify. So, for example, let's say a concept was discussed in the strategy book and was discussed in the design book in the first edition, and different language was used. one group of people may have interpreted the language in strategy and kind of fallen in love with that. And another group of people may have read the language in design and fallen in love with their interpretation of that. If those two interpretations varied from each other, then if we've now clarified that guidance in the new edition, the people who don't agree with that new language, they're going to consider that to be a change. And it's not really. It's just trying to make sure that we're saying the same thing and meaning the same thing.
Okay. And again, I'm not sure, Russell asked this question, I'm not sure if you had said it, mentioned any kind of a release date. Do you know when that, is there a targeted release date?
We have a general number, but until TSO gives something official, we're not allowed to talk about it. So
okay.
It won't be too long now.
Do we have a release year?
Yes, absolutely this year. Absolutely. Okay. Well, consider the fact that they're already typeset and extrapolate from that.
Right. Yeah.
Excellent. And I guess I think you did answer this, but so again, clarification, will the update be known as ITIL V 3.1?
I don't know that it's been that formally identified. I believe it'll probably just be referred to 2011 edition, which is sort of what happens in publishing.
If you look at the front of the novel, it has that, doesn't it? The editions and the year.
Yeah, exactly. So I expect that's how they're going to manage it.
And there's also a question here. I'm just going to ask for clarification, and then I'll list one other point. There's a question from a Ravi. Ravi, if you could do me a favor and just clarify that question a little bit more clear. I just am having a hard time knowing exactly what to ask there, so if you can just reword it, that'd be great, and Ravi will get to your question. And it's a good point to say that it is 12:45, which is typically our target end time, but we will, I think Lou and Malcolm, it's okay if there's still some further questions. If we can continue on to at latest, we'll have a hard stop at 1 if there's still some additional questions, but just so everyone does know that we are aware that typically this is our finishing time. Malcolm and Lou, is it okay if there's a few extra questions that we stay on for just a little bit more?
Sure, I can.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah, sure. As long as this room doesn't get any hotter, I mean.
Yeah, for those of you that weren't here in the preamble, Malcolm is sitting in a very, very hot hotel room somewhere in this world, and he's starting to sweat. So I think we just got to make sure we wrap this up fairly quickly.
Yeah, the problem is, folks, if I turn the air conditioning on, you won't hear me. That's the trouble. So I'm sure there's someone saying, "Turn the air conditioning on right now."
So if there are any other questions in addition to Ravi's question that I've asked for further clarification, if there's any other questions, please post them fairly soon, like within the next few seconds or minutes, and we'll hold off for a little bit longer. And while we're waiting for those additional questions, I just wanted to again, before anybody else drops off, is let you know again that same time and place, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Tuesday, with again Jill Donahue, who is the president and founder of Accelerate. And again, if you haven't heard Jill before, been on one of her sessions, trust me, if you are in any kind of a leadership management role, it is definitely worth your while to attend. So please take a look at your updates, your newsletters, or the Thought Rock site for more information on the actual content that Jill will be delivering next week. Question from Bob: when will the slides replay be available? The slides are typically available tomorrow, so typically within 24 hours they'll be available within Thought Rock, so you can just log in and pick them up there. So Ravi has given me a little bit more clarification here. If I get the printed copy of the book, then will I be able to get the updates whenever you release any updates?
Okay, so if I understand correctly, what you're asking, Ravi, is if you were to purchase them today in the current edition, the 2007 edition, would you then automatically be have a right to the updated editions? Is that what you're asking?
I think let's take a shot at that is what Ravi's asking, and if it's not, he'll clarify again, but yes.
Not in the printed edition. So the only edition where you automatically get the revised texts is when you have an online subscription, because that's paid for every year anyway. You have to renew that subscription every year anyway. For everyone else, if you have printed copies, if you have PDF, if you have ebook format, anyone with those formats will need, if they wish to have the new edition, will have to purchase the new edition. And of course, that doesn't mean you will feel compelled to purchase all of the titles. You may feel that you only want to purchase one title or another, or you may want to purchase the entire suite. Now, of course, since we've done a lot of kind of cross-pollination of the editions. So if something, for example, is discussed in one title, the other title may not discuss it in detail. It may just say, see section 2.5.1, if you will, of the service design book. Those references won't match if you don't have all of the titles of the same edition. Okay, so that's entirely up to each organization to determine what they want to do in terms of whether they want to actually purchase new physical copies or PDFs or e-format. Physical printed copy and the web subscription, those are the versions that will be available first. And then the PDF and the e-book versions will follow as soon as they're possible afterwards.
Okay. Great question here. Probably looks like from someone who's gone through the certification process. This is asking, this person, Sri, is asking, when will any changes to certification, and in parentheses, if any update to example questions, will that come into effect?
Okay. Well, as an accredited training organization and also a member of the exam panel, I do have some specific information on this, much of which I cannot share yet. However, in general, when the exams are issued, the exams are issued based on a syllabus. Since the underpinning theory, concepts, etc., has not changed, the only thing that has to happen for the current exams is for them to be reviewed to make sure that there are no clarifications that cause an update in the language in exam questions, because the underlying content is the same. The exam panel is also reviewing all existing syllabi to see if, particularly any area where there's been more attention paid to it, if that would be an opportunity for in the future to write questions on that new content. It's not, again, new ideas, it's just where we've given it more attention. If the content is more detailed, of course there might be an opportunity for additional questions to be written in those areas. So how the timing of taking advantage of that will be played out, that's been taken into consideration. But for the time being, any training materials that are just being used to teach the books the way they currently are and the syllabi the way they are completely valid. And it will not be a problem for you to continue using them. They may make some adjustments once the new editions are published to make sure that regardless of whether you are studying from the first edition or studying from the new edition, you'll have no trouble passing the exam questions. And as soon as those are, we're allowed to talk about those, we will.
Okay, great. And just, I don't know, again, how much you can clarify, Lou, but just from what I'm kind of gathering, because it's more about clarification, is it safe to assume that the typical course content that has existed at the foundation level, for the most part, shouldn't really be altered that significantly? I would assume that majority of those clarifications will come in at the higher level certifications. Is that a fair statement or not?
In general, yes. Yes, I would say that's accurate. You know, obviously we want to make sure that foundation remains what it is, which is give you a sound foundation regarding the entire library upon which to build. So you can't learn in foundation everything you ever wanted to know about ITIL, but we're afraid to ask.
Right.
That's why there are other courses. But because of that, there's only so far we would ever go in a foundation class.
Okay, great. Malcolm, you have, if you want, you've got 8 minutes to ask Lou any other questions that you would like before we wrap up. Is there anything else that you want to kind of bring up, or any commentary, overall commentary on the process, on the changes that you want to make to the Thought Rock folks?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to overview very quickly the thing that, 2 or 3 things that I think are important that have impressed me generally, apart from Lou's clarification, has been the whole change management approach, the fact that you can put change requests in, you can track those change requests, and there is something in place. So, you know, to my mind, the update is not negative; it's very, very positive. It shows a continual movement forward. So that, to me, was one thing that I think is extremely important. The other thing is the fact that it isn't going to affect too much where we are right now. So folks who are taking exams today, for example, shouldn't be sitting there worrying, am I wasting my time? That's been something else as well, that consistency thing that Lou mentioned 3 or 4 times, that the whole idea of consistency. I think the one area which I'm interested in is going through and having a look at the new diagrams. And I think Ravi's point, I think, was, at least the way I understood it, was more along the lines of, will there be a little supplementary book that says, these bits have been changed, these bits haven't been changed. You often get that in software. You get a software release and you can go and look at what's been updated in this release versus the previous one. I know we're not talking releases, we're talking editions, but is there a short edition kind of brochure that says, look for these things, these are changed in the new edition? And there isn't going to be one of those by the sound of it, but I think that's what Ravi was asking. So no, for me, it's been very positive.
A small caveat to that is we certainly did maintain logs, and some of that information has been provided to accredited training organizations to help them evaluate whether they need to alter their materials at all. And then there is more summarized information regarding just in more of a textual format. So some of that, I believe, will be coming out in kind of update information from the stationary office and from the OGC. But as far as a detailed log giving exact information about this used to be here and now it's there, I don't believe that will be, I don't think there's going to be anything like that for general consumption.
Yeah, I think that general one, the first one you mentioned, the overview one kind of thing, I think that's probably what Rav is asking, just so he can get a quick look and a quick thought on, just the same as you get an update come through, would you like, on your home computer, would you like to upgrade whatever, say Thought Rock, and you have a look and you say yes or no based on what's in the upgrade. I think that's what he was thinking along those lines.
I see.
So I suspect Rav is probably a technical chap.
Okay. That's great. And Susan has a question here. Hopefully, and if it requires more clarification, let me know. But I think it's related again back to questions about exams and content. How about the rollout of the new exams related to content? So I'm not sure if you might need further clarification on what Susan's asking. If you do, just I can ask her to kind of retype that.
Well, as I say, new exams are always coming into the marketplace anyway. So,
right.
For example, I'm in charge of the group that writes the service strategy exams. And we always have available a minimum of 2 sample papers and 2 live papers. And then we have other papers that are in development. And as those papers are developed and QA'd, they go into the mix so that they can then be part of the live pool of questions, the live pool of exams. At the intermediate level, we don't do individual questions. We create an entire paper. So we're always creating new examinations. That would be happening anyway. If they decide to take an older sample exam and retire it and replace it with one that used to be a live exam, that is something that could occasionally happen. Sometimes we will say that we've done quality assurance on a particular question on a particular paper. If we see, for example, that regardless of who was doing the training, regardless of what part of the world that the person was taking the exam in, a particular question isn't performing well, that question may be revised or it may be replaced. So the examinations are always undergoing alteration. In terms of how much the exams may be altered based on the revised content of the library, if the question is questioning a core piece of theory that has not undergone very much change at all, if it's in terms of the way it's been described, if the language that's been used would be valid regardless of the one edition versus the new edition, then that question will remain exactly the way it is. So how much shift will happen in an exam because of the new edition is really something that will evolve over time.
I think also I would expect, I don't think it's a requirement, that training companies and organisations will actually sort of state, based on the new version or the new edition as part of their course descriptions.
Well, and it's particularly important that we do that because one of the requirements of intermediate education is pre-reading. Learners are encouraged to read from the actual library books. So you want to know, is this course, which edition am I supposed to be reading from? But the content in terms of the concepts is really the same. So.
Okay, great. Well, I think we're probably running right down to the wire here, so I think if anybody has any other additional questions and they want to get them filtered out, there's contact information on there that we'll make sure that gets to either Lou or to Malcolm. And as well, there's a 1-800 number there as well. So anytime you are looking for additional questions or answers to those questions, our Thought Rock team can definitely make sure that any of our speakers get access to those questions and help you out. So again, I appreciate everyone for hanging in there and hanging on, those that have stuck with us. I definitely really want to say thank you to Lou and to Malcolm for contributing this educational content, this information on the ITIL, the new ITIL versioning, bringing it to the Thought Rock group and spending time today with us. So thank you guys very much. Very well done. And hopefully we can have you back again as part of the whole Malcolm and Friends time at some other point in the future. So thank you guys very much.
One last thing I do want to mention. The author team will be at the ITSMF conference this year, Fusion, in September. We have a breakfast briefing on the first day of the conference. So if anyone would like to come, by then I expect these editions will have been published. So we will be able to answer a lot more questions at that point. So come to Fusion, come hear us speak.
Excellent. And I'll be one of the MCs.
Excellent.
Fantastic.